A traveler who was having a conversation with a farmer, they started discussing the weather. And the farmer assured this traveler that he could tell how the weather was going to be within the next 24 hours by looking at his cows. He said, if the cows are standing, that means there's not going to be any rain for the next 24 hours. And he said, when the cows are laying down, that means there's going to be rain. And then the traveler turned around and said, what if half of the cows are sitting and half of the cows are standing? What will happen then? And the farmer said, that means half of them are wrong. So predicting has been very interesting thing, and many people have tried to predict many things. And today I'm going to predict your future. And I am convinced that what I will tell you is completely accurate. You say, how could you do that? There's no such thing on this world. Well, I have to say that I am 100% sure whatever I'm going to say is true, because I'm going to repeat whatever God said. And whatever God said is never wrong. I'm going to predict and give you the assurance that God will be with you for the rest of your life. And I can say this with 100% accuracy because Hebrews 13:5 says, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you, I will never abandon you. And if that is the case, have you ever thought why God promises to be with us till the end? If God will never leave us or forsake us, that means He has a purpose for our lives. The only reason He wants to be with us is so that we can fulfill that purpose in our lives. And every one of us that God gives breath and keeps us alive, there's something that God wants to do with us. That's why He says that I'm going to be with you. I'm pretty sure many of you know the story of the burning bush, when God wanted to tell Moses what He wanted him to do for him. And when Moses faced God, God asked him to go to Egypt and save his people from the Egyptian slavery. And what did Moses do? He gave 4 excuses. First one, he said, who am I to go and save the Israelites from the Egyptian Pharaoh? And you know what God's answer was? Moses, it doesn't matter who you are. What matters is who I am. And then Moses wasn't satisfied. He says, I won't know what to say. God said, I will say what you have to say. That wasn't enough either. Moses continues, they won't listen to me. God's answer was that I will work through you, and they will see and they will believe. And then he goes on and says, I don't know how to speak. I don't have the skills. And God's answer was, I will speak through you. And I'm pretty sure when God tells us to do something, we have similar excuses. This, that. Well, just like Moses, we doubt God. And at the beginning of his ministry, Moses was very nervous. But I'm not going to focus on these excuses today. I want to focus on a single question that God asked Moses. And that was, what is that in your hand? What is that in your hand? What do you have? God asked, what do you have in your hand, Moses? Forget all these excuses. What do you have in your hand? Moses said, nothing. What is nothing to us is something for God. That rod that was nothing, God used it to confront the magicians of the Pharaoh, turn the waters of Egypt into blood, bring frogs on the land, bring lice on the Egyptians, bring thunder and hail, which destroyed the crops of Egypt, It brought in wind that brought with it locusts, and they ate whatever the hail didn't destroy. It caused the waters of the Red Sea to rise and become like a wall. It also dried up the bottom of the lake, the sea, the Red Sea, so the Israelites can walk through it on dry land. Also, afterwards, that same rod brought down the waters on the Egyptians, and they sank, they drowned. And then that same rod gave water to the Israelites who were very thirsty, and they didn't have anything to drink. And at the end, we read that that same rod, when Moses lifted up, the Israelites had victory over their enemies. Well, tell me, does this rod look like nothing to you? Does this rod have any significance? Of course, the rod was nothing in itself. There was nothing magical in there. It was a rod, it was a stick. What was significant about it was that it was the only thing that Moses had. God did not ask Moses what he didn't have. We all could make a long list of what we don't have. We don't have enough money. We don't have degree. We don't have this. We don't have that. And we can go on and on with all the things that we don't have. But God is not interested in what you don't have. God never directs our attention to what we don't have, but to what we do have, what he has given us already, even though it seems nothing to us. The key here is that whatever we have, is it available for God? Is it available for God? Would this rod been able to be used if it remained a stick in the hands of Moses? What do you think? Probably not. To be used, it had to be made available to God so God can use it to do great things. Once Moses released it, let go of the rod, it became God's. And God used it in wonderful ways. So what is the difference? When it was in Moses' hand, it was nothing. When it became in God's hand, all of a sudden, there was power in it. It was doing great miracles. The difference is the power of God. It is not our ability. It's not our knowledge. It's not our talent. All that matters is how much of God is in your stick. What is your stick? Your stick represents what you have and what you surrender to God. When God gets in your stick, it's enough. When God gets in it, it will surprise you. We need to ask God to get in our stick. That's the secret. God in our song, God in our preaching, God in our marriage, God in our business, God in our talent. And when God gets in that thing, it is not the same anymore. It will not be the same anymore. Just like Moses, who had never seen his rod do anything like that before. This wasn't just it, whatever I mentioned. What we see is when God got in a rock, that rock started giving water to 2 million people in the desert. When God got in the donkey began to speak, and it rebuked rebellious prophet. When God got in a box, and they called it the Ark of the Covenant, no one would know by looking at the outside that there was power in this ark. How valuable treasure there was inside. And the ark went before the people of Israel and signified the presence and the power of God. And today, God has chosen to place his presence and power and glory in human tents. 2 Corinthians 4:7, it says, "But we have this treasure in earthen containers, so that the extraordinary greatness of the power will be of God and not from ourselves." It was only when Moses released his rod to God that God's power came into this stick, this rod. It is only when we surrender ourselves to God, that is only when His power will be manifested through us. It will be seen through us. People will recognize it, will see it. All you have to do is be willing to let go of what you have. When Moses gave his rod to God, he let go of his rod. The rod of Moses became the rod of God. A few chapters later, you read about this rod. It says God's rod. It was no longer Moses' rod because Moses gave it to God. Now it was God's. And each time Moses used this rod, he was triumphant. Moses had carried that staff all along. He already had it. You know what he did with those rods? He hit the sheep on their behinds with that rod. That's all that rod served for. But now, all of a sudden, this rod is doing great things. All it needed was to be touched by God and make it useful. One of the greatest problems we have as believers is we have tendency to underestimate what we have. We have many examples in the Bible. The widow of Zarephath, she said, I have just enough meal and oil for one little cake. We will eat and we will die. And then another widow said, I have just enough, a little pot of oil. After that, I'm going to lose my sons to slavery because I have nothing to pay my debts. And then when Jesus was preaching to the 5,000 plus, he asked, what do you have to feed these people? And what did they find? 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And Philip said, this is not enough. This is not enough for 5,000 plus people to be fed. In each case, their little bit was enough. Why? They put it in God's hands. And it became enough. And that's all we have to do. Remember Samson, when he faced the Philistines? He found the jawbone of a donkey. If I was Samson, I would say, what can I do with this bone of a donkey? You know, he killed 1,000 men with that jawbone. All God needs is for us to make what we have available for Him. Make ourselves available for Him. When Samson used this jawbone, it became an instrument of mass destruction. If he had thought that this jawbone cannot do anything, guess what? He was going to be dead at that point. If we make ourselves available to Him, He will take us and make us His. It is not our voice that we sing with. It is God's. It is not our voice that we teach with. It's God's. It is not our hands that we work with. They're also God's. Look what God did with a stick. What's in your hand today? Do you hear God asking you, what's that in your hand? What do you have in your hand? And whatever it is that you have you made it God's? Has He touched it? Is He in it? So often we feel we need extraordinary abilities to please God and do God's work and do great things for Him. The truth is, we already have whatever we need. God has given us what we need to do great things for Him. We just need to make it available for God, to let God touch it first and then use it. And we will serve the purpose that God has prepared for us. May God bless you.